This episode is proudly sponsored by the Helix, a new innovation district located in New Brunswick, New Jersey, the heart of the Northeast Corridor. The Helix provides a critical ecosystem for innovation by offering a range of physical environments, a vibrant community of leading innovators, and a strategic central location on the Northeast Corridor. The Helix will uniquely mix workspaces, classrooms, laboratories, venues, and collaborative environments, creating a dynamic community and setting for innovative minds. Universities, startups, Fortune 500 companies, entrepreneurs, researchers, and many others will all call the Helix home. Thus far, the Helix has assembled a community of innovative private and public organizations, such as Rutgers Health, the New Jersey Innovation Hub, RWJ Barnabas Health, Hackensack Meridian Health, universities from Ireland and Israel, and others. The Helix is where ideas will come to life. To learn more, visit HelixNJ.com.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politi and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Politi and Lanny here in rainy New Jersey. But Brian Fonseca, you're someplace interesting. You are in sunny Houston. Is it sunny in Houston? It's got to be better than it is here in Houston. No?
Gorgeous Houston, sunny
Gorgeous.
The last 3 days, 80 degrees with some beautiful breeze. It feels like a gorgeous May, June afternoon in New Jersey. Could not ask for better weather down here.
Go to hell. But
now, if it makes you feel better, if you were hungry at 10:30 last night and wanted to go grab a bite, you can go to one of the 24-hour diners our great reporter, Pete, is going to. I got out of the McDonald's All-American game last night at 10:30, starving, dying for something. Every restaurant within a 10-mile radius of this downtown is closed. And I'm wondering, is everywhere else, aside from New Jersey, just a barren wasteland after like 9 p.m.? It was awful.
yeah, Houston's not the world's best road city. I can confirm that. They've had Super Bowls there, and it was not pleasant. But we're still going to play the world's smallest violin for you because it hasn't stopped raining here for 48 hours. You got to see some good, I mean, on the pantheon of like Rutgers moments that didn't really involve Rutgers. I'm watching this at home, man. You know, if you're a Rutgers fan and you watched that game last night and you were not taking out a calendar and just crossing off the days to the start of basketball season, you are dead inside. I mean, this was a fantastic, not just a performance, and this is what I think separates it, right? It's one thing for Dylan Harper to be the best player at the McDonald's All-American game, which is what he was. Like, that's one. But it's just another thing for the narrative of this, the entire game. It's all they talked about with Dylan Harper. It was just like 20 minutes in the first half of nonstop Dylan Harper and Rutgers talk. Couldn't have been better for the program. All right, you're on the scene. Was that the same thing in Houston? Was Dylan Harper the center of the universe at the game itself?
Yes, like you said, he was the best player on the floor, and it kind of built on a strong couple days in Houston where he was the best player at one of the practices. He stood out in the scrimmage, and it was very clear, one, he was taking this very seriously. Two, he was trying to prove himself a bit to all the people around there, the recruiting analysts, the scouts, that not only is he an offensive, really strong player, but he's really good defensively when he puts his mind to it, and he does have that motor, which I'm sure that was Steve Pikiell's favorite part of the entire weekend whenever he hears that feedback. But at the game, just the first quarter, the first 5 minutes, you saw everything that makes Dylan Harper one of the best players in his class. He has the ball in a string. He plays at his own pace. He can get to the rim at will. He's a smart player who, one of his drives to the rim, one of his teammates comes out to set a screen. He sees his defender cheat to the screen, and he jumps immediately to the open space, right to the rim.
Fantastic.
Like that high-level stuff from him. And he's doing this against – I know it's an all-star game. I talked to some scouts who said in the past these games are kind of like the NBA all-star game. But this was a pretty competitive group. I think Dylan Harper said as much about the week leading up to it, and they played hard. And Dylan looked tremendous. And I think if you're a Rutgers fan watching that, you can feel really good about Dylan Harper stepping in on day one and baseline being one of the better players on the floor every time he steps on it. And I think more than anything, the biggest quality I think Rutgers fans can be excited about is Dylan Harper is steady. He's not a guy that's up and down. He will always, almost every time I've seen him, he's always put in, at worst, a solid performance. And I think if you're a Rutgers fan looking at a five-star prospect coming in, that's all you can really want. And I think Dylan delivers that in droves.
Oh, yeah. And this was offensive rebounds. This was assists. He had a couple of just great passes on break. I don't know. And then they took him off. This is the thing that I noticed too. And again, he was subbed out with the other starters, and Trey Johnson was another tremendous player in that group. But they took him off the court, and that's when the West. It seemed like they were completely lost when he wasn't on the court. It was just all around the whole thing. He gave the interview at halftime. I get it. Like, we've seen him. Like, I've seen him at Don Bosco. We know he's a good player. I've seen him a bunch of times. But seeing him in that atmosphere when you're around the other 30 best players in high school basketball, to me, was really significant, and it elevates what I've expect for the season coming up. Did you walk away that as well when you were done with it? Did you think, all right, this is going to be even more than I thought?
Yes. The thing with Dylan that I was really impressed with is that he takes this stuff on the chin. He really embraces the big moments. Like, he doesn't shy away when he's playing in this huge game, national TV, scouts, Gary Payton and John Wall are sitting courtside, Kendrick Perkins and Terrell Owens, which was a fun little random cameo. They're all watching him, and he's relishing in it. He's celebrating. Yeah. He's basking in the moment. And then you see kind of on social media, this guy called Trill Withers, who's a pretty big, not Trilly Donovan, another Trill, pretty big Twitter personality.
He's kind
Trill. Of like, there's another Trill. It might be brothers, maybe. He's tweeting out, Rutgers has 2 McDonald's All-Americans, and people, recruiting analysts, national writers like John Fanta are talking buzz about Rutgers. And then you go to the post-game press conference, and Dylan Harper says, he backs up the hype. He adds to the hype. He says people are going to want to see us in college. It's going to be scary. And he's kind of, planting his flag. Like, I think if you're a Rutgers fan, you got to be encouraged with not only what these guys add, but the way they're embracing the expectations that are going to be absolutely massive. I think if you're a Rutgers fan, you watched last night, there's not anything, at least with Dylan Harper, that you saw that does not leave you feeling very, very encouraged and positive about next year.
Yeah, and if you're the kind that finds the gray cloud amongst the good moments, it wasn't a great game for Ace Bailey. It was a terrible. It was like you didn't walk away saying, "Oh man, he's not as good as we thought he was." He just didn't really play well. He had a bad turnover late in the game with Cooper Flagg defending him. Cooper Flagg is just an incredible defensive player. You can tell that even by watching just one All-Star game. I had a block on Dylan Harper earlier in the game that was fantastic too. But he was just kind of mad. He missed a couple shots, took a few shots like what I would describe as like All-Star game shots, right? He was taking shots that were kind of out of rhythm, like he wanted to score, like he wanted to, here I'm open, I'm going to jack it. Just wasn't his best performance. What was his kind of reaction afterward? Was he down on himself? What was your sense?
So we couldn't talk to Ace after the game. They only made a certain number of players available. We did talk to him before the game, and he was very excited about representing Rutgers at the game. What I'll say about Ace is this has been a common theme from when I've watched them and in talking to people who have watched them along the year. He is very much a home run hitter. You say he takes these all-star game shots. That's kind of his shot selection all the time. And when things go really well, like they did at the Rack when he played there with McEachern, he has fireworks. The best player offensively in the class when it comes to his ceiling, without a doubt. It is spectacular when it comes together. When it doesn't, when he's missing shots and he's kind of forcing things and they're not going well, you really are left scratching your head. And I think those are the maddening consistencies that Steve Peichel and the staff are going to have to hammer out. But I don't think they'll be able to completely hammer it out because this is kind of who Ace Bailey is. So I think Rutgers fans got a glimpse of it and should prepare themselves for some really high highs, some nights where you're pinching yourself about a player of that caliber playing for Rutgers, and some nights where you're really scratching your head and thinking this guy was a 5-star just because, again, shot selection is not quite there, and that has been talked about among the scouts watching him. If I compare Dylan and Ace, let me use a baseball analogy. Dylan to me is like Ichiro. He's a singles guy. He gets on base. He does the smart things. He does the right things, steals bases, disciplined, and high level. Whereas Ace Bailey is, I don't know if Aaron Judge is exactly the right comparison, but he's a home run hitter. He's a masher. He hits bombs. He hits home runs that go out of the stadium and you're left just in awe. But he also strikes out maybe 3 times a game. Maybe Giancarlo Stanton is a better comparison. I don't know. I don't watch the
stick with Judge. I'll go to Stanton. He's always hurt. He's making too much money. That'll be what you come up with.
All right, fine. We'll stick with Judge. But that's kind of just watching these guys a lot over the past year. I've watched more high school basketball in the past 12 months than I have in my entire life. That's the feeling I get. But obviously there's 7 months between now and the first game. Steve Peichel and the staff will have a few months to work with these guys. And I think they'll be able to hammer out some of that and clean it up. But that's what I would expect going into next season from those two.
All right. Fascinating to watch. Meanwhile, some actual news coming out of, guess what? They're going to have teammates. This is exciting. For a while, it looked like it would only be two players on this team. I exaggerate, of course, but Steve Peichel dipped into the portal, pulled somebody out. Tyson Acuff. Did I pronounce it? Is that Acuff? It's Acuff, not Acuff. Okay. Tyson Acuff, Eastern Michigan scoring guy who can get a basket, as you described him. I like that description. What did you learn about him when you're doing your research on Tyson Acuff?
The biggest thing is exactly that. Last year, Rutgers, when they were going on these 7-minute scoring droughts and missing 10 field goals in a row, they did not have a guy where they can give the ball and say, for the love of God, just put the ball in the basket for us. Please get us a bucket. They've had those guys in the past before, Geo Baker, Ron Harper, and it's not a one-to-one comparison in their playing style. But what I'm saying is this guy is not afraid of getting the ball and trying to score. He was a high-volume, high-usage guy at Eastern Michigan. He took 30% of the shots when he was on the floor. He had the ball in his hands almost all the time. And I think, obviously, his role will decrease when he comes to Rutgers. I think he'd be closer to being a sixth man than a starter, at least from where I sit now on the projection of the roster. And I think he'd be a great sixth man. Very much a Jacob Young kind of spark plug off the bench, scoring, gets to the rim. It's one of his strengths, and he finishes well there. He would have the second best layup shooting percentage on the team last year if he was on it. Only Antoine Wolfolk was better. He can shoot from mid-range. He can shoot a little bit from three. His numbers aren't great, but that's because, again, he took 20 shots a game, and a lot of them were guarded because he was the only scoring option. If you look at what he did at Eastern Michigan the year before, when he was the third option behind Amani Bates and Noah Farrakhan from New Jersey, the numbers were a little bit better, and it does show that he's capable of being a secondary, tertiary guy as opposed to being the guy. So I think it's a good get for Rutgers, especially if he fits that role of the sixth man. It's a good PR look. He's the 8th leading scorer in college basketball this year. You could argue, again, it is all because of volume, but that's still a nice thing to sell. And it's a good first step, I think, for Rutgers in the portal. And I think it eases some anxiety from the Rutgers fans who were ready to claw their eyes out because it had been 2 weeks since the portal opened and they had got nobody. That was a nice little surprise on a Monday morning for everybody.
I do have to laugh. And if you long-time listeners of the podcast know that my even after 25 years, 26 years of being up here, I'm constantly amazed by the dichotomy of the football and basketball fan bases. I'm just going to throw this out there. Right, the football team had an inaccurate quarterback, went into the portal and got a slightly less inaccurate quarterback. And the football fan base said, hey, wait a minute. That guy's just a slightly less inaccurate quarterback. The basketball team had an inaccurate backcourt, went into the portal, got a slightly inaccurate guard, and that's what the stats say. Is all I'm saying. That's what the 29% 3-point. All I'm saying. Slightly less inaccurate guard, and the fan base said, that's exactly what we needed. Damn. They were just like, yes, that's the guy. I just let the laugh out loud. And you pointed out, and I was just a little surprised. I was just a little surprised. I thought that the first guy they pulled out of the portal was going to be a 40% shooter from 3-point range. I was just a little, when I saw 29%, and I get it, high volume, I get the whole thing, but he's never been a dead eye 3-point shooter. He's not that guy. They still need that guy.
Yes, that is one of the two priorities with getting a big man. They will get a sharpshooter out of the portal because if they don't, they're going to be in deep. You know what?
Yeah. Okay.
I think they will. I think Martini is a great shooter, and I think Pat will allude to his visit to Rutgers a little bit later, but I think he's kind of the first piece of the puzzle. If he does commit, which it looks like things are trending in the right direction, he's a elite spot-up shooter. He'll fill that role. I hear you. I think two things help in the rationalization. One, like I said, it had been 2 weeks. If I had committed to Rutgers to be a walk-on, I think people would have been fired up just to have a name to talk about. And two, I think the fact they were so bad offensively last year, what they are filling in kind of helps. Look, 29% from three is not great. His shooting numbers aren't great, but they just watched Derek Simpson for a full year. I think anything over that is an upgrade. And listen, that's not me trying to be disrespectful to Derek Simpson. Great kid. He's going to St. Joe's. I think I speak for all of us on the pod. We wish him all the luck. He's a great guy, and I think that fits him really well. But I think Ty Sakoff, if he's going to be the sixth man, and replace Simpson, I think that's very clearly an upgrade. I don't disagree at all with your assessment of the two fan bases. I thought that was really spot on, and I'm glad you said it and not.
Meanwhile, if again, we have to get this on YouTube, because if you could watch what just happened, Pat Lanny's sitting there with the entire time as we talked about the McDonald's All-American, not nursing, but cradling his little baby. And then Candace Lanny, the greatest field hockey player in Ivy League history, comes downstairs and retrieves the baby during this happened, just as we were going to go, like, and now let's go to Pat. This time we were going to say, right? It's perfect timing, right, Pat?
So are you saying that the football team, are you not buying that competition will make the quarterback position better? You're not buying it?
Oh, I'm totally buying it. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay.
I'm all in on that. Sure.
All right. So
anything would make the quarterback position better if you have another quarterback, of course.
Okay. All right. Good.
Yes.
That's the narrative right now, and I think it's definitely true. I think your assessment, if you just look at the stats alone, is correct. But I think the experience in the system, Wimsatt with the year with Shiraka, I think you'll see some better numbers this year if that's how it all pans out. But anyway, yeah.
All right. So more interesting.
You're right. The greatest field hockey player in the history of the Ivy League. That was a smooth handoff, right?
Smooth handoff. She did not drop that. She took that was some great relay Olympic-esque handoff there, baton passing. All right. So the most interesting thing that happened at Rutgers football practice was a basketball player showing up.
Yes.
That's always good news. Tell us about running into Mr. Martini.
Oh, it was actually really hilarious because the windows were allowed to see football practice are very limited, very small. But it just so happened that as we were walking into the bubble, because they were practicing inside because of the rain yesterday, it's a revolving door, right? One of those spinny doors.
Yes.
So I'm walking into the bubble, and then all of a sudden there's a really pretty tall guy and an entourage coming out the revolving door on the other side. So I'm pushing the door, and he's coming, and Martini's coming in the revolving door on the opposite side. I almost crushed him.
You could have locked him in there.
I could have just kept. Yeah, you're right.
I could have just stopped, put your feet planted it. We got him
here at Rutgers. That's it. This is your official visit. And now you're
admit or you die.
Yeah, you're officially stuck in the bubble. This is what you'll breathe for the next 1 year of eligibility. So you make 40% from 3 points from 3-point land. You just stay in the bubble and shoot 3-pointers until you can hit 40%. That's it.
I got to think, though, seeing him you didn't get to see him interact with Greg Shannon, but the fact he wanted to come see Greg Shannon was.
That's what the great narrative that came out of it was, that he was on his official visit, and him and his brother was a great football player at Watchung Hills, Chad Martini, quarterback. Now he plays at Cornell. The narrative was that they've grown up, they grew up down the road in Somerset County, and they've always been like Rutgers football fans. So he wanted to meet Shiano. He's always been a fan of Shiano, and that's what the first thing they did. So as the football team was like doing warm-ups and drills and stuff, he got to interact with Shiano, and then they took him. Then he kind of left practice as things started getting started.
Yeah, I feel like if you're meeting the football coach, Brian, you're coming to at this point that you're just going through with this. Is there any competition for this guy, or are we going to have an announcement sometime in the next couple of days?
He's getting some interest from a couple Big Ten schools, Wisconsin, Maryland, and a lot of Atlantic 10 schools. But he visited Rutgers twice in the span of 5 days. He's a Rutgers football fan growing up. This is an opportunity to play at a high level with a chance to make a tournament run and play a role.
Start. What do you mean? I guess really.
Look, it depends on. I don't know for a fact. I don't know what the plan is. I don't know what they're telling him. I don't know. I could see him starting at the 4. I could see him coming off the bench as a sharpshooter. I could see a lot of things happening. It all kind of depends on how the roster shakes out. As we've seen in the first couple of weeks of the portal, nothing is guaranteed because names pop up all the time. I have seen every player that has entered the portal coming to Rutgers, from Bronny James to who's even in the portal. That's a whole debacle. That Dick Weiss, legendary sports writer, should not be allowed on Twitter. He's getting duped by April Fool's jokes, tweeting out that he's entering the portal. And then other publications like On3 and Fox News are aggregating Hoops Weiss.
Leave Hoops Weiss alone. Did he really? He tweeted Bronny James was going to the portal?
An April Fool's joke that Bronny James was entering the portal.
Okay.
A day later, yesterday, Hoops Weiss himself who typically sees news and tweets it out himself as kind of like an aggregation service, I guess, tweets out, sounds like Bronny James is entering the portal. People take that as him saying Bronny, reporting it. So then On3 aggregates him, Fox News aggregates him, all these other NBA sites who don't know anything about college basketball aggregate him, and then all of a sudden LeBron is in his locker room pre-game getting asked where Bronny James is going.
Awesome. I love that story. If you imagine Hoop's wife, he's such a nice man. If you ever meet Hoop's wife, I'm sure he didn't even had no idea that's what was happening. That's the best I could describe it.
Circled back and said, guys, I can't confirm he's entering the portal. He had no idea the brouhaha he just caused. He caused seriously like an event in the NBA world. And now poor Bronny James' phone is probably blowing up. But anyway, Rutgers fans have him coming to Rutgers. Every top player going to the portal is coming to Rutgers. All this to say is things are kind of fluid, so I don't know. Taking advantage of this conversation, Matt Alacco, priority target for Rutgers, Zach Martini's teammate at Princeton. They had talked about they're close. They're close friends. They're roommates. They talked about taking a visit to Rutgers together. It does sound like Alacco and Rutgers is not trending in the right direction. I talked to someone close to Alacco yesterday who said he's kind of narrowing schools. I was told Rutgers is in the mix. But then his father spoke to the Columbus Dispatch, Adam Jardy, who covers Ohio State, which again, Alacco is an Ohio native. He grew up 20 minutes away from Ohio State. He took an unofficial visit there last week while he was home for Easter. He told Adam Jardy that Ohio State, Villanova, Butler, and Notre Dame are looking like the schools he's zeroing in on. And then he's going to further cut that list and take visits after the dead period, which starts this Friday. That is not to say that Rutgers is out of it. I had heard a couple of days ago Rutgers still felt confident where they stood. I don't think they're going to wave the white flag, but things are not trending in the right direction there. We'll see. Ohio State is getting a lot of talent back. They're adding guys out of the portal. It's a evolving situation. But my point here being that you never know with this stuff until it's over.
Right.
We'll see.
It is interesting when we haven't done this podcast since Gavin Griffith out. Derek Simpson landing at St. Joe's. That seems like a good fit for him. Actually, he's more of an A10 player. He can have the ball in his hands on that team a lot. So I did some math, and this is just, of course, if I did the math, chances are the math is incorrect. But I did some math, and right now, coming back next year, assuming that some guys that we think are leaving, we've got 17.85% of the minutes on this team are returning. That's it. And 16.3% of the scoring. It's pretty amazing, right? I mean, that's like a low number. This is just going to be a completely different team. We knew that going in, but I think Gavin Griffith just kind of confirms it, that this, I mean, not just a couple new, everything about this team is going to be new. That's just where we are in college basketball.
I saw this on Twitter the other day, and I thought it's a great point. I don't know how accurate or how much it applies to Rutgers, but it was a good reminder of the transfer portal era. That the tweet essentially said, when you look at players transferring, you have to realize that not all of them are transferring because they're looking to better their situation, certainly, but it's also because they were quote unquote fired in a lot of ways. Pico's not firing guys,
no,
but
not everybody.
In a lot of ways, like that's a big part of it. It definitely happens in football all the time, and yeah, you got to fit, or there's a mutual parting of ways, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah, I don't get the sense that they threw their body in front of Gavin Griffith trying to get out the door. That's how I feel from afar. Do you disagree with that, Brian? That they had sort of a conversation. They wanted him to stay, but they weren't like Lanny in the revolving door with Zach Martini doing that to keep him here.
Right. I think this has kind of been an evolving situation throughout the year. We had heard through the grapevine that in December-ish, Gavin had expressed some discontent with his role, and that those whispers kind of calmed down as the season went on. He played a decent amount towards the end of the year and looked like he was improving. And he told me at the Big Ten tournament that he expected to return. I think he did at that point expect to return, and I think he would have played a sizable role off the bench. I think the hope would have been that he would be the sharpshooter, that he would develop into that role after an off season of strength and conditioning and having some experience in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they were happy with the projection of their role, them being Gavin Griffiths and his family. I think things did not go very well the freshman year, certainly not the way they had hoped and expected. You reach that point when you're expressing that, and you express the intent to transfer, I don't think Steve Peichel was trying to convince anybody to stay. I think he made it very clear that he wanted guys who wanted to be at Rutgers and wanted to partake in their role. So I think that's kind of just a red flag that you kind of wave. And I don't think Gavin Griffiths gave him a lot of reasons in his freshman season to think he's a guy that has to stay. I don't think he was processed. I think there were very clear lines of delineation here. I think Derek Simpson, Antoine Wolfolk, and Antonio Chol, I don't know if they were processed per se, but the writing was on the wall. They were not going to play next year. All three of them made the right move, moving on, finding new homes. Antonio Chol to Howard, Derek Simpson to St. Joe's, much better fits for them. I think Cliff Omori and Moat Mag, their careers ran their course. They are each going somewhere else for their final year of eligibility. In a world where there's no COVID year, they would be gone anyway. No harm, no foul there. Just kind of the way things go. And then Gavin Griffiths is the real essence of what the transfer portal is nowadays, where you can't even trust a 4-star freshman you brought in. You played him 25 minutes as a freshman, despite some struggles. You can't even trust that those guys are staying to develop. It really is a 1 year at a time kind of deal nowadays. And I think Steve Peichel so far has done much better this offseason than he did last year.
Experience the Heldridge Hotel, a luxury hotel that's perfect for both the business and leisure traveler. Ideally located within minutes of Rutgers University, the Heldridge is convenient to all the action and activities at SHI Stadium, Jersey Mike's Arena, and the Rutgers University campus. The moment you walk through the doors of the Heldridge Hotel and Conference Center, you know you're someplace different. A place with an independent spirit and a boutique vibe. A place where you can immerse yourself in your meeting or event as easily as you can the local culture. Located in the heart of the city, the Heldridge lets you experience all that New Brunswick has to offer. Whether you're coming to New Brunswick for a fun weekend with friends, in town for a Scarlet Knights game, or attending a business meeting, book your accommodations today at theheldridge.com.
All right, we'll come back to some basketball questions when we do the insider questions. Let's just stick away to football really quick. Because obviously there's been a bunch of news. We hadn't talked to Greg Chandler forever. He comes out and drops one big bomb. And I was, again, doing math. He announced that Tyrone Powell had torn his Achilles. Did he say tear? What was the exact terminology, Pat, to that?
Achilles injury and got surgery, so you could put one and one together.
Right. Partial tear. I guess there's different levels. Anyway, I was surprised, and I when they said that he'll probably be back for the season. I mean, doing the math on this, that's usually a 9-month injury. We're kind of sitting there. I mean, is that where's the optimism based in that, or are we just kind of wishful thinking this?
I think it's wishful thinking. I went back and did the math too. It obviously happened. You could probably say earliest late December, probably early January. That puts you right at like September. If you just do the quick math, right? So First game is August 31st. Luckily, Rutgers has a little bit, and then like football is a sport where you can just get right off the couch, and it's he's going to need some training camp and some weeks of practice before he's full go. So I think it is a little optimistic. I think you can get away with saying he'll be ready for the season in April. But when push comes to shove, at the start of training camp in August, I think that's a really good evaluation of where he actually is. And we'll get to see if he's out there on the practice field or whatnot. So Aaron Rodgers threw this whole timeline thing like for a loop, and that was technical, of course, but
he did that for TV ratings. ESPN. He was never playing last year. I mean, it's insane.
I don't think Tyrone Powell will be spewing conspiracy theories and
go see a real doctor, Tyrone, and get
testing
and get your vaccines updated.
Yeah, so we're good there, which is great.
So I would classify him as one of the 5 most important players on this team. Do you agree with that, or is there depth behind him?
Absolutely, he's one of the top 5 most important players. And just look at when Rutgers, he got hurt in the Indiana game. Obviously, when you looked at the schedule from afar last year, you saw the back half of the schedule. You're like, all right, Rutgers it's going to be a long shot to win those last games or whatever. But it was clearly a different defense when he wasn't on the field, and they made a lot of adjustments schematically and personnel wise to make up for his absence. And that's why you got to see like 5 different linebackers play last season while he was out. You saw Abram Wright in the bowl game have the interception. Moses Walker got some run late in the season. Dariel Jabomi filled in, Jameer Wright Collins, and then even Timmy Hinespeeder, played some solid snaps. So I wrote this yesterday in the linebacker preview that they have depth there, but someone has to really step up and be not only the 1A to Tyrone Powell, but a guy that can just step up in case of an injury, or also like really emerge as the next Tyrone Powell or Deion Jennings, because Rutgers has had a lot of stability the last 2 years in linebacker. Mo Toure making that big switch added has been a big boost as well. So, it really, like, it comes down to like Mo Toure's got to, Moses Walker has to step up to, his recruiting ranking, and, Abram Wright is looking like a really nice developmental piece. So I think Rutgers is in a good position. Obviously, if Powell's going to miss time, that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, I guess it just went from a position where I thought last year was one of the strongest of the team to now it's not a question mark, but it's certainly it's a concern, especially if Powell can't play. Not as big as the current concern apparently as punter is, because they don't have one. Like, that's amazing. Rutgers has gone from having the best college punter in the world to having a pretty good punter to just, what happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. It seemed from what Greg Schiano said that Flynn Appleby, he was an older age-wise, he was older when he arrived at Rutgers after playing Australian football for a little while. So he maybe the whole college experience wasn't for him. He decided that he wanted to go back to Australia. Rutgers does have people who are capable of punting in the program right now. That, let's just put that out there. There are guys that have punted before. And then Greg Schiano also dropped that we're in talks with Pro Kick Australia, the pipeline that brought in Corsack and Appleby to find the next punter. So I do imagine that in the next month or two, there will be
I hope so.
A body from down under to fill the mix.
His name's gonna be Kadam Sorsak. He's he's this young lad coming from. He looks familiar, doesn't he? He's gonna be his
Kadam Sorsak.
Yes, exactly. His ninth year of punting. Slipping back in. All right. So, have you been able to watch any practice at all? What's the event? You've seen the quarterbacks throw the ball? Have we had nothing? Okay.
Nothing.
We're watching them stretch their hamstrings.
But the first scrimmage will be in about 10 days from now, when we'll get to watch actual football.
But they're saying the right things about the competition based on everything.
Yeah, Brian did a nice report on what they're saying, so he can summarize that if you want. Ethan basically said that the first guy that welcomed to the campus was Gavin, and he's just a really good dude, and they don't see it as 1-versus-1 competition. They see it as, this is just how we're all going to get better. So of course they're saying the right things.
Kumbaya. Straight to August 31st at 11:59 a.m.
Rutgers is going to improve the quarterback position with the power of friendship. People talk about scheme, zone blocking, running, offensive. Rutgers has friendship. What is more powerful than that?
It's it's a My Little Pony. The power of friendship. It's going to friendship power. It's going to carry them through. That's good. I love it.
They all said the right things. Nothing is going to be resolved on the first day of spring camp, and I don't think anything's going to be resolved until August. So I think you might as well just keep the good vibes going, enjoy what you can seeing out of the spring game, and look forward to a more I don't know if contentious is the right word, but a more interesting quarterback battle come training camp.
All right. Good job. Let's dive into some insider questions. We didn't get a lot, but we got some good ones. Now that Jacob Allen has medically retired, there's nothing left for people to ask, apparently. But this is a guy. I like this one. This is good. So here we go. Which is more likely? Rutgers makes the NCAA tournament next season, or Rutgers makes a bowl game that's better than the Pinstripe? I love this question. Yeah. I don't know. Who wants to take a stab at that first? Go ahead.
We basically said previous podcasts that if they don't do either of those things, it'll be a major disappointment. So that's kind of the floor of what. Yeah.
So which one are you more concerned about? I guess is the way to phrase it.
After hearing those Kentucky comments about freshmen, or after seeing what happened in Kentucky and hearing all the coaches come out and say, "Oh, you can't build around freshmen," I think that was more concerning. But I don't know. I don't think any. I think both are realistic. So I would be, if I had a pick, I would say I'd be more concerned about basketball, because I think the football is so much. You elevate to a new position, elevate to a new standard. And I think they did that last year. all the guys back, easier schedule. It'd be really hard to take a step back, in my opinion.
I'm less concerned about basketball than I was, 24 hours ago, certainly. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that if I would be very surprised if the football team did not make a bowl game. And again, better than pinstripe is a good way of putting it, but I think most of them are better than pinstripe. I'd be very surprised if they didn't make a bowl game. I would only be sort of surprised if they didn't make the NCAA tournament right now. Brian, do you agree with me, or are you going to go the other direction?
I think you guys make fair points. I think you guys are absolutely nuts. I think if they don't make the NCAA tournament, it would be a monumental disaster. If they don't make a bowl game better than the Pinstripe Bowl, or even don't make a bowl game at all, I mean, is it that huge of a letdown of a surprise?
Yes, absolutely it is. Oh my kids, they got the entire team coming back. They got the easiest schedule they're ever going to have in the Big Ten. It would be devastating if they went 5-7. No question. Come on.
What would be more devastating if they missed the NCAA tournament, which has 68 teams? 68 teams.
Wait, there's 68 bowl games. So how many bowl teams are there?
Rutgers had a good season last year. They improved immensely on the football field. They went 6-6 in the regular season. Barely made the bowl game. I don't know why we're discussing as though they're a juggernaut program that went 9-3 last year and is bringing back, the core of an Orange Bowl team. Rutgers is bringing in 2 5-star McDonald's All-American freshmen. They're going to have 2 of the best players in the Big Ten. What are we talking about, man? And look, yes, the Big Ten schedule is easier, but just because they're not playing Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State doesn't mean they're playing the Mississippi College of Women 7 times a year. They're still playing good teams.
They have Howard and Akron to start the year, like Virginia Tech. Their non-conference schedule, if again, they should be 4-0 again before they get to Big Ten play. So that means they only have to win 2.
Virginia Tech is not easy for a road trip. They were good at the end of last year. They bring back a lot of talent like Rutgers, including a quarterback that is better than the quarterback Rutgers has on its roster. And they're playing in Blacksburg, which is an elite atmosphere. I cannot wait to listen to Metallica when they run into the field, by the way, just as an aside. That's not an easy game at all. I think that's the most important game on the schedule. We'll discuss that later on in the year. Howard and Akron, yes, they're wins. But last year they played Wagner and Temple.
Yes.
If you were making the preseason top 25 right now for football, I don't think Rutgers is playing 2 or 3 teams in that. They're playing a Washington team that's losing its head coach, its quarterback, a UCLA team that's lost its head coach, USC team that lost its quarterback. I mean, those are the 3 best teams in the schedule. I'm just saying.
Look, you broke it down pretty well at the bowl game, Steve. You had the other way, right? Like Rutgers' schedule versus all these teams that played in a bowl. I forget exactly what the number.
Yeah, right. They all won their bowl games. I get it, but that's.
Yeah, but all these Washington, USC, they're reloaded. So I don't know. I could go both ways, but to answer the original question, Brian does make a great point. Like 2 McDonald's All-Americans and you can't make the NCAA tournament, that would be a mitigated disaster.
It would be an unmitigated disaster, totally. But I think it would be just as unmitigated in football if you're not in a bowl game. But goodness gracious.
Rutgers basketball will never, ever, I'm very confident in saying this, have 2 5-star players on its roster ever again. This will never, ever, ever happen. This is to quote Dylan Harper, once in a lifetime opportunity. Rutgers will have good to somewhat great players on its football roster going forward with Greg Schiano. Greg Schiano, if things continue on this trajectory, will have better football teams at Rutgers in the next 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years. They will have better opportunities. Rutgers basketball will never,
but I'm not asking you which is more disappointing. I imagine which would be more likely, I guess was the question, right? It's not. I agree that basketball would be more disappointing if it didn't make the NCAA tournament. I'm just not saying it'd be more likely. I guess that's what the question was.
Well, don't those 2 things go hand in hand? If something is more likely and it doesn't happen, does that not make it more disappointing?
Okay. I see your point. Yes.
In that logic, making the NCAA tournament is more likely, so missing it would make it more of a disappointment. Right. Look, I cannot foresee a scenario where Rutgers misses the NCAA tournament, partly because I cannot imagine the meltdown that would happen if that happened, barring, obviously, unforeseen circumstances, catastrophic injury, etc. You can't control those things. But barring that, like, this team has to make the NCAA tournament. They have to. So like, if Rutgers misses a bowl game next year, will there be a meltdown? Will there be sadness? Will there be revolt? Maybe. Yes. People will be very upset. If Rutgers basketball does not make the NCAA tournament next year, let alone a deep run, just not make the tournament, I think people will lose all hope in this program for a long time. I think it would be catastrophic.
Put a bow on it.
Put a bow on it.
We've never seen this at Rutgers before in basketball. What we've seen from Rutgers football is that they last year created this level that they're at, right? Like, so they've done it. This whole basketball is an experiment at the end of the day. It's a whole new team. You don't know how they're going to gel. Don't know how they're going to be coached. So I think from that perspective, it's a little bit, it's more likely because the foundation is set for football, whereas basketball is completely new.
Yes. But to put another bow on top of your bow, they both better do those two things because, yes, as we discuss it, the more outrage I would be on either one of them. All right, great question. Thanks. All right. Will there be some questions, more questions coming up here? NIL. With all the talk of NIL, is there any way to know or find out what student athletes make? Or is that taboo since it could cause a lot of infighting if they knew what their teammates are making? There was a funny little Twitter thing, Brian, that happened with Acuff coming in here. Someone from the Detroit media tweeted that he was going to make $200,000 in NIL, and we all went, woo! And then one of the assistant coach, Marlon Williamson, I believe, tweeted just a cap, which I've learned from our segment on this podcast means you're full of it. So I don't know. Even when we think we have information about NIL, we do not have information about NIL. I guess the answer to that.
Even more proof that the Rutgers Rant is a public service for teaching multiple Rutgers fans who mentioned us when they saw that tweet and said, I learned what cat meant from the Rutgers Rant. So thank you to our loyal listeners. You're welcome.
I had to ask, by the way. I had forgot. I knew it meant that's bullshit, but I couldn't remember if it was which direction it was. Was it that's not cat? But then I remembered it was not. So I had to just clarify. And you guys, of course, were there for me because you are my connection to Gen Z.
Well, I wasn't going to blow up your spot and mention that you completely forgot the lesson we taught you on the podcast, but I guess you did it yourself. So yes, to recap the situation really quickly, Tony Paul, who allegedly does write for the Detroit News, I made sure to make sure this guy was legit. I found his bio on the site. I found his Twitter. He is, from all accounts, a legitimate reporter. He tweets that he's hearing from sources that Acuff is receiving around the neighborhood of $200,000 in NIL money to go to Rutgers. This is a rarity because there is not much information out there, true or not, about what kind of money guys are making in NIL. It's almost impossible to report this stuff. It's kept very secret for multiple reasons. One, exactly because of that infighting, because let's use this example. If the people learn that Tyson Acuff is making $200,000 and I'm Jeremiah Williams and I'm making, again, for example, $100,000, I'll think, hey, wait a minute, why is that guy making double what I'm making if I'm already proven at Rutgers? And then that becomes a whole thing. So that's a big reason why Marlon Williamson on his private Twitter account, I'm not sure if he realizes that people who follow him could just screenshot it and make it public. He tweets a cap emoji, signifying that's a lie. Tony Paul deletes the tweet and then circles back to say it's what he's hearing, but he couldn't verify it, whatever. The moral of this story is that do not take any NIL numbers you see in public as gospel. Almost certainly they are false, exaggerated by either party that wants to send out a narrative, and they are almost always unreliable. So what money are they going to make at NIL is going to be a mystery until or if the NCAA ever regulates and creates an infrastructure that they have to report it, which if you trust in the NCAA, then I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. So to answer the question, unfortunately, we will never find out unless you can get one of these guys in the collectives or in the NIL places or the coaches at a bar and give them about 30 beers until they start singing like birds.
The best part about this, and I love this because like the coaches simultaneously don't want you to know how much they're paying if it's a lot of money because they don't want their players to know, but they also don't want the narrative out there that they don't have any money, which is, of course, so when Keith Sargent's big story on the NIL came out, the coaches were like, hey, wait a minute, we don't want that narrative out here either. That's one. Number two, if Acuff was really making that much money, that is more than, I know this is one of these rare ones that I do know about what Cliff Amore was making last year. That would have been more than Big Cliff was making last year. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these numbers. I do think they do have more money to play with this year than they've had in the past. For whatever it's worth, I don't know what that number is. Clearly, it's not what clearly not what some programs have. And that's all part of the calculation when they're getting these guys. You know, like you look at someone who comes in the portal, if he's got 50 schools on their list and 10 of them are from the SEC, you're not going to get them. All right, good question.
I do think a big thing is obviously if they get involved in that Vegas tournament, that gives them $1 million in NIL money to work around with. Again, we've heard things are trending in the right direction. There are some things that have to be worked out on the back end from entities outside of Rutgers. But again, it sounds like it's headed in the right direction. You do that, you get into that tournament, you get a guaranteed $1 million, which is a lot of money to play with, and a chance to win another $1 million if you win. I think that's giving you the ability with a much bigger budget. And that's why I think you hear that figure of $200,000 this year, knowing that they will probably be in that $1 million tournament. It sounds a lot more realistic than last year, where if I saw that last year, I would raise more than a couple eyebrows at it.
All right. Tony and Lawrence had a good question considering the Acuff signing and the hot pursuit of Alaco Martini. Fair to say that Grant and Dortch, part of this recruiting class, aren't expecting a lot of playing time next year. Along those lines, we got a question off Twitter from NJ.com. Will any of the 2024 recruiting class even stay past this year, excluding Dylan and Ace? Will we even get to see these players develop? Those two kind of go hand in hand. It's interesting. And you're thinking about this, like we've learned the biggest thing that's getting people in the portal is am I going to play? I think it's still bigger than NIL for the most part. What do you think, Brian? Are we kind of based on what they're doing? Are they thinking that Grant and Dortch, maybe to a lesser degree, or that the rest of this recruiting class, other than Ace, and they're not their developmental players are not expected to contribute right away? And is that a mistake in that guys don't stay if they're waiting to play?
So I would break up the class in roughly 3 classes. I would say Ace and Dylan are clearly a level above everyone else. They will play large roles from day one, 25, 30 minutes a night, lots of shots, big roles. Lathan Somerville is an interesting guy that kind of, to me, depends on what they do at center in the portal. If they get a 30-minute guy who's going to play most of the minutes, Somerville could be the first guy off the bench and play a sizable role, and depending on matchups, play a little bit more in some games than others. Or if they get a younger guy, maybe like a second-year, third-year guy, like a Gus Yalden, a kid from Wisconsin who didn't play at Wisconsin but was heavily recruited by Rutgers when he was in high school. That's just an example. Maybe Lathan Somerville kind of splits time, plays some 20 minutes, and has like a split role at center. So there's a guy that could play a lot. I think independent of what his role will be, I think he'll play a decent amount. And then Dortch and Grant are guys that I see as developmental guys. If they play at all next year, I think they'll play very minimal, like 11th, 12th guy off the bench. I think they're guys that you kind of look down the road as developmental guys the way Caleb McConnell and Mawot Mag were. Is that possible in the day of the transfer portal where guys can transfer after a year? I don't know. I think these guys are realistic probably and understand that they can have more time once Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey and all the other veterans of this team move on after next year. We'll see, but I just don't think they're quite ready to play. I think Dortch has a long way to go offensively, especially. And Dylan Grant didn't play high school basketball his senior year because he was back in Toronto taking care of some personal business from what I understand. So I would temper expectations on those two. I know we call them a Fab Five class, and that might be a little unfair to those two guys on the back end because this is really a top-heavy class. And to really quickly on your quick, you mentioned about playing time being more important, I would say it like this. Guys who are playing a lot, their priority is getting more NIL money to take advantage. Whereas guys at the bottom of the rotation, guys like, again, Derek Simpson, Antoine Woolfolk, who are not playing a lot, they don't really have the option of getting NIL, much NIL, if any. So their priority is getting onto the court so they can make some NIL.
The guys who got fired, as Pat put early on. Yeah. And this is a good segue to another question, Pat. And it's funny because in the new age of the transfer portal, will big schools do any year-over-year player development anymore? It appears that every high major team wants to eject underperforming talent, even if they're young. This is the point I come back to when you look at it this way. Like Rutgers needs to be, as a Big Ten team, needs to be one of the schools that's going in the portal and picking guys off who they know can play. Right. It's not just that the guys below them are impatient. It's that these guys now, like Rutgers now has to be a player, has to go, like they are in a position where they should be out picking off guys from Eastern Michigan and replacing and putting known quantities on the court. Right. So, I mean, that should scare a guy like Dortch or Grant as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting when I would love to look back at Rutgers 10 years from now as a case study, this season as a case study of how NIL transfers and high school recruiting ultimately plays out in the next 10 years, because what we've learned is that high school recruiting has been devalued. Essentially, there's less opportunities for high schoolers. NIL, eventually we're probably going to shift to a pay to play format. If it's, I would assume in the next 10 years. And then also, like, what did the 5-star experiment, how did that end up playing out at Rutgers? I think those 3 things are fascinating, like, case studies. And then I also, I would love to see how this Rutgers season plays out. Obviously it's going to play. I'd love to see how it plays out, of course, but like from the 30,000 foot view of, like, wow, was this a shot in the dark? Was this a one-off, a blip on the radar, or is this how it's going to be from now on? Because, like you said, after the season, if it does truly change, if Rutgers is a deep March team, what does it change for their future? You're right. You can't just sit back and have one good year and then expect and be satisfied being 500 from there on out. You're going to want consistent, a program that competes for championships every year, and to do that, you got to go out and find the best players. So yeah, it'll be really a really fascinating case study. 10 years from now.
Yeah, Brian, I don't know if you agree with him, but the idea that this quote unquote developmental program where we're going to get a Geo Baker and we're going to polish that diamond. I don't know. Like, I don't know if those days are done. It's still Steve Pikiell's strength, but I think it is, for the most part, a quaint notion that happened in the past.
I agree for the most part. I don't think it's impossible. I think there could be possibilities. Like, for example, Dylan Grant, if he's a junior 3 years from now and he's like a star player at Rutgers, wouldn't shock me. But oftentimes these guys, if they aren't in a bigger role early on in their careers, they have the opportunity to leave. Where I think the developmental programs are of today's day and age are the mid-majors that get these under-recruited guys, develop them into stars at the mid-major level, the low major level, and then they enter the portal and the fruits of their labor become a high major player through that avenue. Those, to me, are the new age Geo Bakers, where high major teams don't have to develop their players. They just kind of are the waiting spots, open their arms and say, come here, come to Papa, for all the players who went to a lower level and had great development from these other coaches, who I feel really bad for because they put in so much work. They do all the hard stuff of making these guys really good, and then they have to unfortunately say, all right, go be great for another guy at a higher level.
All right, a few more questions. This is a good one, since a lot of people noticed that Tyson Acuff now with Rutgers. This has put Steve Pikiell in a better position for his cousin Darius, who apparently, is he a 5-star? We could have.
Yes, Darius Acuff is a 5-star top 10 point guard in the 2025 class out of Detroit. He plays at IMG Academy now, but he did play at Cass Tech, where Tyson Acuff and Marlon Williamson graduated from. I certainly think it helps. Marlon Williamson already had a good relationship with him and the family, all Detroit natives, and Rutgers was in it with him. He did have a visit planned for Rutgers in February for the Mission game, then ended up getting canceled. The chatter around that time was that Kentucky and Kansas and Blue Bloods of that level were really making some ground there, and it seemed like Kentucky was emerging as an early favorite. I still think that's the case, but it does help that he has a close family member. They're close. They played a lot of one-on-one basketball. Darius was younger, and they have a good connection. It does help to have a guy on the inside who, if things go well, can vouch for Rutgers, can give Darius an inside look at the program, especially if they have a deep run into March. I'm sure that can help. I don't think it's going to be the thing that puts Rutgers over the top or anything, or is going to convince Darius to choose Rutgers over Kentucky, for example. I think Rutgers has to kind of just stay in the race. This keeps them in the race. Where it'll end up, we'll see. But again, I'd reiterate that right now it seems like Kentucky and other elite programs are kind of the route it seems like Darius is headed.
Question for clarification here.
Yeah.
What is their relationship? Because I've seen it reported that they're brothers, but then they're cousins. What is actually their relationship?
Great question. They're cousins.
All right. Good job on that. Let's take one more question because it segues into our final segment from Bori Blanco on the Twitter. or as I call him, Mr. Blanco. If you ever seen Ed in person, he's a dude, a big man. Love you, Ed. Stay on Ed's good side. He's a great guy. All right. And I'm not just saying that because he's a big dude. Anyway, all right. Ed wants to know what's happening with our lacrosse teams. Good question. What's happening with our lacrosse U? We were declaring this.
On the men's side, there's been some crucial injuries, which have kind of slowed them down. And you're kind of in a volatile spot here where they're a program that relies a lot on transfers. And that worked out really well in the Final Four year when they got a lot of key guys out of the portal, especially some guys out of the Ivy Leagues. It didn't pan out as well this year. And they obviously play in a very competitive league in the Big Ten, although they weren't that great in non-conference either. They lost to Army. They've lost to every ranked team they've played. And then in a game that was seen as an even matchup against Ohio State, they were blown out. So not the lacrosse team's year. And the same could be said for the women's lacrosse side. Not a great year either. A down year for both of them. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to explain the tactics of why. I will not dive deeper. All I can tell you is it's not a great year, and you have to hope that the benefit of being a transfer portal kind of program is that you flush away this year, and next year you're back in the portal,
right,
trying to get new prospects and hope for a cleanup next year. So what you give up in continuity, you give up in renewed hope every offseason.
Yes, the trend of plucking Ivy League players who run out of eligibility and don't let them play. That's not going to work anymore, I guess. All right, some more. What else is going on?
So it's been a while since we last talked. So to catch up on baseball, I'm sure this is why you want to talk about it so enthusiastically, Steve. They got swept in a 2-game series at your Fighting Tar Heels in North Carolina. But they followed that up by sweeping Delaware at Delaware. They beat Rider. They beat Lafayette. They went 2-1 against UConn. They beat NJIT. And then they went 1-2 against Michigan State in their Big Ten opener. So not a great start for a team that probably has to finish in the top 2 in the league to get an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament because, unfortunately, the Big Ten stinks at baseball. But they took care of business in the non-conference for the most part, and you got to hope that they can kind of bounce back from the Michigan State series and have a good run at it in the Big Ten.
Excellent. All right. Anything else? Oh, Tim Pernetti. Big news for former Rutgers athletic director Tim Pernetti, who many people still, for good reason, admire, remember, adore for getting Rutgers into the Big Ten. He's going to be the commissioner at the American Athletic Conference. He's wanted to be, his entire career, wanted to eventually become a conference commissioner. Certainly not the path that Tim thought his career was going to take over the last 10 years, but his contacts in the industry only strengthened in the 10 years since he left Rutgers. I think that's just a tremendous hire for the American. I don't know what the future of that conference is, but given all the changes in college sports and where it seems like it's just going to be the big two, but they have the right guy. If someone can figure it out, it's Tim. So that was an excellent hire by the American Athletic Conference. I think that's all we got. Anything else, guys? No.
Now I'm a basketball insider based on my deep roots and sources told me that this was an official visit for Zach Martini yesterday. So it was an absolute official visit.
And I just want to quickly make the same note that everyone made when the Pernetti news got out. It is ironic that the man who took Rutgers out of the AAC to go to the Big Ten is now becoming the commissioner of the AAC and trying to put it all back together. So it's a nice little full loop, full circle moment to end the pod.
Full circle. Beautiful. All right. Full circle. Good job, guys. Get home safely, Brian. We'll see you soon. I will be back, I don't know, sometime next week. I'm sure to talk about some football scrimmages, and hopefully we'll have something resembling the full basketball roster at that point. Until then, thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.